Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, congratulations. You have made it to the weekend, and this is your Friday Roundup. Super excited to get a chance to chat with you guys today, bring in some listener feedback. As usual, we're going to be talking about the Monday episode, and we talked to Bobby from Millennial Money Man, highlighting the fact that, kids get it. If you frame things the right way, they want to know how to build wealth. And then specifically even diving deeper into how to consider starting some sort of side hustle or business. And he has so much expertise with regards to starting a blog. So it's cool for him to kind of pull the curtain back and show a little bit of what that actually looks like. So this is going to be a fun episode. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Jonathan, yeah, doing well. What's going on by you?
Well, it's been an interesting time in the Mendonca household. So first of all, we did have some snow in Richmond. That was just perfect. And the power didn't go out, so there was no crisis. And we just had a wonderful time. Actually got a fire going. It was just awesome. But aside from that, the big news in our family is that my wife, so Danny, she just finished narrating her very first audiobook. And this was kind of cool because it actually ties to our community, and it goes to the idea of not only just taking action and doing something, but then also just the value of putting yourself out there and seeing whether or not you can develop a new skill set, and then seeing if you can somehow turn that into a business down the road. And so we actually had David Latteray reach out to us on the show and said, I've written a book. I'm going to go get this thing published. I'm going to self-publish this and put it out to Amazon, but I would love to see whether or not your wife would be interested in narrating it. This actually happened, and Danny put the time in it. And Brad, I had no idea how much work audio narration actually is, but it is a beast. Having said that, it was rewarding. It was fulfilling. She had the time of her life, and she has a finished product, and it is going to be out on Amazon or Audible at some point. And just super proud of her, one, for just doing that. And just wanted to give her a shout out on the show, wanted to give David a shout out on the show, and just say to our audience, there are so many different opportunities and side hustles and businesses that are out there. And I hope that we can continue to find people that have done these projects. They've actually taken action. They've done something, and we can share them with you in the hopes that they can inspire you or motivate you to go tackle your side hustle or project.
Yeah, and just to add a little context, because it sounded a little random to me, but for the audience out there, David heard Jonathan talk about how Danny had this amazing accent and had contemplated doing that type of audio work, but was looking to get started and didn't know, frankly, if she was going to. And I guess David just reached out really out of nowhere just to our email address. And yeah, the rest is history, and it's all set. So that is a really cool side hustle.
I'm super excited for her. So the audiobook is going to be released on Amazon at some point within the next couple months. I'd love for you to check it out when it goes live. I'll put a link in the appropriate show notes episode, but super excited for her to have actually done that. What about you, Brad? Anything new in the Barrett household?
Nothing too crazy. You mentioned the snow, which was a real surprise for early December here in Richmond. We definitely got a good handful of inches of snow, and me and the girls, we've spent, it actually fell on the weekend, so it was perfect. We got to spend, 4 or 5 hours outside, basically just playing and sledding and creating forts and all sorts of little ice chairs. I mean, we did every single thing we could think of, and it was just a really good time. I mean, it's one of those, you hope they have these good memories of childhood and playing with their dad. And it was just a lot of fun, just a lot of silliness and just good old fashioned free entertainment, right? I mean, that's a frugal hack in and of itself, is just take what nature gives you and enjoy it.
Is anybody else excited about when the Barrett pool opens up?
I am looking forward to frolicking already. So.
I got wind of the fact that people in your neighborhood have learned that you have a podcast, and there are now multiple people at this pool that listen to the Choose FI podcast. And it's hilarious how many times that pool has been plugged on this show.
Yeah, you've pretty much put a moratorium on our pool mentions. But yeah, we have a growing audience at the pool, and it's really not even due to me. I think like a couple people just randomly mention it to others, and I have people now like joining our Richmond Choose FI local group who I'm like, oh wow, I know that guy from the pool. I can't believe they listened, or that family listens to the podcast. It's so cool.
Awesome. Sorry, man. I just got to throw your pool under the bus at least once every couple weeks. Honestly, it's just jealousy, man. It's just jealousy. Let's go back and talk about this episode with Bobby, Millennial Money Man. So, this is a guy that's put the time in, and he's made consistently right moves, and he's willing to share. I mean, he's giving away this information for free. And yes, he has these courses, but even the courses are based on what his core audience has asked for. And I thought it would be neat for us just maybe to explore that model just for a little bit and talk about kind of what the building blocks of building a blog actually looks like, what moves Bobby has made that, have been beneficial, and then maybe just kind of use this as a platform for what else we could explore either on this episode or down the road in future episodes. But I think there's something here.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I mean, you certainly are an expert now on just the last year on building websites, building podcasts, what you have to think about, the little actual nuts and bolts of this. But I just wanted to touch on something you said a minute ago there, which was Bobby's made all the right moves. That's true. I mean, Bobby has been an incredible success. But if you really think about it, Bobby took an incredible risk. I mean, he left his stable job when he was making $2 from his site. So I don't want everybody to think like this was preordained success, that Bobby was guaranteed and he has been working on websites for 10 years and, et cetera, et cetera. He took a very large risk and he believed in himself. That is not easy to do. So I did just want to focus on that just for 30 seconds. But yeah, Jonathan, take it away with the site building.
Yeah. So I got to figure out how far we really want to go. I would be happy to do a couple episodes, maybe going into next year if our audience was interested in kind of the mechanics behind building a blog, just maybe what I've seen looking back in terms of what's worked and what hasn't worked. I doubt that we're going to have enough time on this particular episode to do that. But in my mind, it comes back to adding value to the world, adding value back to your community. And so what you saw, Bobby had this pivot, this natural pivot where he thought Millennial Money Man was going to be this seminar that he would offer to kids and teach them about finance. But he realized very quickly that wasn't his core audience. That wasn't who was finding them. It was a group of people that are looking to build businesses in this new economy, who were looking to learn about personal finance and then incorporate these things into their lives. And he noticed that his message was having an impact on them. He was empowering them. And so once he realized who his audience was and what they were getting benefit from, which you can measure by looking at different things like page views and shares and that sort of thing, he dialed in on that and he said, all right, this is what's working. This is what isn't. And I need to produce more of that. Then he got very engaged with his community, just like me and you are very engaged with our community. I mean, he has these one-on-one interactions. And so he made sure that he's communicating with them, one on his blog, and then two on social media through his Facebook groups, through his Facebook pages, that sort of thing. But honestly, your sole goal with any blogger that's had any level of success, it's not because specifically them. It's not enough to be this wonderful, awesome, amazing person. It's all about your community, and it's adding value back to people's lives. And you have to realize that. And what's that? Brad, help me out with this. Who is the author that did the 1,000 True Fans, and what was the overarching idea behind that?
Yeah, so that was Kevin Kelly, and he writes at kk.org, and we'll link this up in the show notes certainly. But yeah, it's called 1,000 True Fans. And it's basically saying to be a successful creator, you don't need millions. You don't need millions of dollars or customers or clients or fans or anything. You need a tribe. And he argues that you need a tribe of about 1,000 true fans who will go to bat for you, who will follow you, who will buy your products, who will share and tell their friends about you. And that core group, that community, as we talk about here all the time, that is what makes a successful project, a successful blog, a successful podcast, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And honestly, that should be very motivating because that is a very finite number. That's a metric that is something that you can target on to say, how am I going to go viral? To say, how am I going to reach millions and millions of people? That can be daunting. That could to the point where maybe you just don't even try, but to say, how can I improve the lives of 1,000 people? Really all you got to start with is one. And then how can I move from there? I think that is something that's totally doable. Everybody doesn't need to take the same path to this. Think about what is one problem that I've had in my life. What is one thing that I figured out a solution from, and would other people benefit from this? Figure out how to take that message and help one other person with it. A website is a great way to do this. And then once you say, okay, I've got a website, I've packaged the solution to this problem. How can I get this in front of some more faces? You can start to figure out that next step and that next step. And then that person follows up with you because they have a follow-up question or a comment and they say they implemented it, and you start a dialogue. And the amazing thing about having a website that only 25 people know that it exists, you can know all 25 of those people's names, right? You can be on a first name basis with the first 25 people in your audience, and then you just grow that base from there. So that's just a little bit of a mindset and a little bit of a way of approaching this. You can't expect to start with millions of page views, and you can't count on going viral. But what you can do is add value to a very small subset of the population's life and then grow it by word of mouth from there. And I think that what Bobby did is he took that next step and says, you always have to start by adding value and building trust. Once you have those two components and you amplify this and rinse and repeat over a period of 1 to 2 years, if you're able to grow that to a point where you don't even need to have a huge audience, it could be 1,000 people, it could be 2,000 people, it could be 10, 20,000 people. But once you have this core audience that trusts you and that is sharing your information, the way to make, I guess what he said is millions, hundreds of thousands and millions. And Brad and I don't have anything like this, so I'm relying on what Bobby said. But the way to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars down the road is you find something, you just reach out to that audience, use that audience to tell you what needs or problems or issues or could they use a solution for. And then, so you find something that needs an answer, and then you create a product around solving that problem. Solving problems is everything. Look at every product since the beginning of time that's had massive success. It's solved a problem or it's improved on another solution just a little bit. So figure out what it is that you can add value, build a course, and then offer it back to your community as a paid product. That is how you take a blog that may be earning some form of income and you ramp it up over time and you earn massive amounts of income. So what's cool about this is not necessarily that you need to do this specific idea, but that it opens up the possibility that you don't need to have a new idea. You can see what other people are doing that's working, and you can adapt that to your specific purposes. And you don't need to get it right the first time. It's this constant process of iteration and slow improvement. And when you hear that there's no new idea under the sun, that should be something that is empowering, because it tells you that you don't need to be an original person in order to have massive success. You just need to be willing to get started. We started this by saying just take action and then go back, iterate that process, fine tune it. And at the end of the day, it's going to go back to that personal level of trust and loyalty that you've built with your audience. And it can take as little as 1,000 people.
Yeah, Jonathan, there's a lot there. And I think I want to start with something you get on me about all the time, which is my original limiting belief about my original website, richmondsavers.com. The quote that I always say is, I was never going to be Mr. Money Mustache, so I created this site called Richmond Savers, which was obviously very limiting on a national level. And I guess I have that as this limiting belief in my head, but if you take it through the lens of 1,000 true fans, well, I did that exactly, right? Like I saw a problem, which was there are lots of families like mine who want to go to Disney World, who don't want to spend $4,000 on, getting there, staying there, and going to the park, right? Which is a crazy amount of money, but that's realistic for millions of people. I saw that problem. I realized, okay, you can use travel rewards points to get there, and I can help teach people. And I literally did that one person at a time. Like as quote unquote inefficient as that was, I looked at it as, okay, I can add value, I can help people, and I can make some money on the backside if, people signed up for these credit cards through my links. So that was not going to be quote unquote Mr. Money Mustache, right? And getting millions upon millions of page views, but it didn't need to be successful. So I think you've helped me overcome that limiting belief that, and by rereading this 1,000 True Fans makes me realize, like, you don't need those millions. You need a tribe of people that you've helped, and they'll go to bat for you. I mean, I still have people who I helped get to Disney 3 years ago who send 10 of their friends to my site to do the exact same plan. And I mean, that is really cool. You have people who just want to help you, who have been helped by you and want to then in turn help their friends, help people they know, and frankly, send them back to my site to send me some value. So I mean, that is just like the perfect example, in my opinion, of 1,000 True Fans. And like you said, this does not have to be Bobby's exact method of creating a course and selling it and X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. It's finding a problem, finding where you can add value to the world, and taking action. That is what we're constantly talking about here at Choose a Bias. It's easy to have ideas. It's easy to take in podcasts and read tons of blogs and just say, oh, maybe I'll do that someday. But take action. That's what we want from you here. Whether it's creating this site, creating a blog, creating a business, or even just making your life better some way. Like, we hope that you leave this podcast with some information that you can take action on. So I think this is really a good example of that.
All right. So I'm going to unroll my next huge idea, life-changing idea on the podcast right now. You ready for this?
This is my weekly where I get sandbagged by something insane by Jonathan.
No, I'm just kidding. But what I want to show people is just like, these ideas don't have to be revolutionary. This is just what it looks like to have a blog. You're trying to solve problems for people. So let me start with a problem. Chipotle. I love it. It's so expensive. And, you know, especially if you're wanting to do it more than once or twice a week. But it's
a restaurant?
Yeah, the restaurant. Just the In-N-Out restaurant, Chipotle. They make delicious, you know, burritos, burrito bowls, that sort of thing. Their steak and chicken is amazing, but you're looking at $10 a serving, right? If you're getting it for yourself. I want to make it at home. But it's a pain in the tail, or at least when I go and look at the copycat recipes online, it's a pain in the tail. But I know there has to be a simpler way of doing it. And so I land on the fact that I don't think I would mind building this into my weekly routine as long as I didn't have to measure anything. As soon as you tell me that I have to measure 1/8 of a teaspoon of chili powder or cumin into something, I'm out. I'm checked, totally out. It's not going to happen. Decision fatigue, it's over. So I decided, what if I could do like an unmeasured approach where the only metrics I use are a handful or a sprinkle or season to taste? Like, that's the explicit directions. That's as specific as I'm going to get with the instructions. And I create a process where I can build Chipotle steak and chicken into my diet every week, 2 to 3 nights a week for life. That's the lane I want to find myself. And so you could just do this, or you could say, if I'm feeling this way, I bet you that there are hundreds or thousands of other people that would like to know what is a simpler way that I could have Chipotle at home. So I took the time to solve that problem for myself and make it very simple. And now, using what we just talked about, I'm going to say, okay, maybe I could share this with other people and I could add value to their life. So this Friday, and I haven't written a single word of this, although I've taken some of the pictures. This Friday, I'm going to release a guide called Part 1 of the Ultimate Guide to Chipotle. And that's going to be on the blog. I'm going to show you step by step what I did to make my homemade Chipotle marinade, and just beginning to end. And it's amazing, Brad. It'll blow your mind. It's so good. I think I shared a picture on the Facebook group and I sent one to you. It is as good as it looked.
Nice. Well, it certainly looked good. Yeah, you sent me a bunch of pictures via text and I was salivating. So yeah, I'm looking forward to them.
Okay. Well, see, this is me forcing myself to write it, because if I haven't committed on here, then I just won't do it. But my point is, like, all right, this is really simple, but people actually wonder, what is an easy way to do this? And what holds people back from actually, making Chipotle on a regular basis? It's just that life is, there's too much going on, and it's hard to get out to the point where you have to measure all these little things out. You have to go through this 4-step process. So if I can simplify this for myself, my life's easier. But from the blogger angle, if I can document that process and share it with other people that might have similar interest and be interested in this, now I've added value back and I've built that level of trust. And once you have that level of trust, you have that audience, there are always ways for the creative person to monetize it on the back end. And there are ways that you can do it that don't cost your audience. It's win-win. Brad, with your affiliate marketing with Richmond Savers, your audience, they're supporting you, but at the same time, you're not charging anything of them directly. I mean, that's an incredible model with affiliate services where they're winning because they're able to use something that you've recommended. They're not paying you anything directly. They're just getting pure benefit from the course. And then you're getting paid some sort of fund from the company for having recommended their service on the backside. And I love that model. It's like that virtuous circle that we talk about over and over again. That's just something that appeals to me. It's not a method you need to use, but the underlying principle is anytime you see a problem and you solve that problem, when you're thinking about things through the lens of someone that's creating a tribe online by adding value back, start thinking about how could I document this and make the bar lower the barrier of entry for someone else that might be interested in pursuing this path. I use the Chipotle as just a very stupid, simple example to show you that this does not have to be rocket science. It's literally you documenting the little life hacks that you figured out that make life more fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good example, certainly. And it's like this unifying theory of what we're always talking about here. It's finding your tribe, finding your community, and helping people, right? Making a difference, taking action, helping people. Like, I sound like a broken record, but it really is that simple. Like we said with the 1,000 True Fans, it doesn't need to be this grandiose plan of reaching 10 million people. If you can reach 100 people, 200 people, 500 people, whatever it may be, you're making a positive impact on the world. And I guarantee you, because I know from personal experience, that is going to make you feel incredible. When do you have that in the regular course of your life, where most of us are just kind of going through the motions, right? We're going to work, we're hanging out with our family, and that's wonderful, but you're not really helping anybody. And like, I know I personally get so much satisfaction from making someone else's life a little bit better. We all have these ways that we can take our talent stack, as I kind of quoted on the Monday episode, which is find these areas of your life where you're really good at a bunch of little things and take those ideas and mash them up together. Like, there are very few people who are good at, like Bobby. Bobby took his various skills and said, I have this blog and I'm creating it, and it's going to be a slow thing, right? That was okay. That's part of the growing process, but he couldn't expect to make a living from that right away. But what he did do was take those skills to his local market, right? And brought value to local businesses that he had either a relationship with, had just walked into saying, hey, this is what I do. And, he took this entire talent stack and looked at it two different ways, right? He had this online business, which he was growing, and he had this offline business that was informed by the skills that he learned online. And I mean, to me, that is just such an interesting little pivot that, again, you just have to take a step back sometimes and realize, where can I add value? How can I get from here to there? So Bobby probably knew he wanted to be online. Like, that was his plan, right? But to get from here to there, he needed to have this intermediate step, just like I did with helping people literally with one-on-one phone calls. I mean, no joke, at lunchtime from 12 to 1 every day, I would have 2 phone calls. I would talk to people for 25, 30 minutes and help them with any questions they had. And that would be that. I mean, that was really 4 to 5 days a week. That's kind of crazy for someone who's sitting there as a tax manager and then takes his lunch hour and does that. But it was what I needed to do to add value and to potentially grow it to something that I could scale, which I eventually did on a different website, Travel Miles 101. But that was that intermediate step. And I think that's important for us all to just kind of look at the issue, take a step back. Where can you add value? How can you approach this a little bit differently than everybody else, right? Like, for me, there were hundreds of other travel rewards blogs, and they were really indistinguishable from each other. But I was the only guy getting on the phone helping people because I knew what it was like to start out at this and have dozens of questions, right? Because it sounds crazy when you first learn about it. I was there to help people like me get over this issue, and that was my tribe. So it worked exceptionally well for me.
Brad, I was thinking, like, as you're saying this, I'm thinking in my mind, like, one of the things that I know for me as a travel rewards guy that wants to keep it very simple, but doesn't want to spend hundreds of hours digging through the interwebs to figure out what my next card should be, I really lean on advice like yours on what my next step should be. And obviously, you know how I feel about going through the different chase cards and working my way through this natural progression. But at some point in time, you get to a place where you're trying to figure out, okay, which card would be the best fit for my travel goals for the next year. And so I was thinking, If I'm wondering that right now, why don't we take the collective hive mind of the Choose FI Facebook group and we use that once a week? We have a dedicated thread to what should my next card be. Me and you will sit on that thread along with the thousands of experienced travel rewards people that are in that group. And we just kind of help people work through what their next choice should be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea that operates on every single thing we've talked about this episode. So yeah, another good idea, Jonathan, that I haven't heard before. So you're just chock full of them. It's great.
I have like a whiteboard. I have a secret whiteboard in my office, like things to nail Brad with once per week. And now I've checked off. I still got 3 more. You will find out.
Nice. Lucky me. Well, at least the audience knows. I mean, we really are iterating this on the fly, which is cool. Like, this is a work in progress. And I think a lot of people have seen that with Choose FI, where it's come from way back in episode 1 to now. It's completely different. And we've taken things that we've learned and iterated and figured out what worked and what didn't. And we're just kind of rolling from there and just trying to make it better. So yeah, Jonathan, I think that's a great idea. I think you and I have been a little wary of, the Facebook group is very on target. And I've been a little wary of having it being overrun by hundreds of different travel rewards posts. But I think that's a great idea to have it in, maybe even 1 or 2, right? You could do once a week on cards and maybe once a week on destinations, or, hey, I've got these points. What do I do? And, of course, it'll be quick hit responses. But yeah, I think that's a great idea and would add value. And frankly, like, it's very on target, since we say that travel rewards are a pillar of FI. And obviously, if people can take 1 or 2 vacations a year for close to free with rewards points, that's a pretty big FI win as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, another good idea.
All right, man, we'll set it up, make it happen. All right, guys. So I know those are some just kind of both high level and into the weeds type details on what's going on here at Choose FI, and also, hopefully some things that you can use as you start to consider what sort of business you might like to start, especially if it involves a blog. Brad and I are very conscious of the fact that we don't want to be a how to build a blog show, all the time, every single week. So it's kind of one of those things that we throw in here and there. And we also bring in people who have something to add to the conversation that we think that you can benefit from, people that have had an influence on us, people that we think can definitely add value to your life as well. This will not be a week-to-week thing. This will be kind of, we do something on tax, we do something on building a business, we do something on real estate. It's all about life optimization. That's what ties it all together. But I hope that this sprinkling of flavor really makes the show more enjoyable for you. But thanks for humoring us. And let's go ahead and bring in some audience feedback, maybe some audience questions as well. And Brad, one of the things that I was hoping to take a few minutes and cover today is this idea of doing an end-of-year checklist. So if you give me just a second, I have a voicemail that I'm going to play.
Hi, Brad and Jonathan. My name is Mindy, and I really enjoy your podcast. One idea that I thought would be helpful for all of us is if you could do kind of a to-do list, if you will, for the end of the year, so we can make sure that we're fully optimizing 2017 and heading into 2018. For example, I know that I have to check to see whether my husband and I's income is at a level where we won't get the tax advantages of an IRA. So I may have to do a backdoor Roth before the end of the year. Also, I need to check about tax loss harvesting and possibly open enrollment for our health insurance to see if there's any better plans out there or if we want to take the leap into an HSA. So I think this is an idea that might help others, and so I'd really appreciate it if you could fit it into one of your shows before the end of the year. Thank you.
Mindy, great question. And absolutely, we would love to take some time to talk about this. I'm curious just from Brad's perspective, because as an accountant, he kind of has a year-over-year process, I'm sure. I can give you some of my small takeaways. So how about I start, Brad, you fill in the cracks, and then maybe we can bring in some of our audience feedback, because we did post this on the Facebook group as well. The only thing that I typically do myself, historically speaking, is I just basically project out what I expect my taxes to be. And then based on that, I adjust my W-4 up or down to try and get as close to that perfect amount as possible. I don't want the government to send me a ton of money back, and I don't want to send the government a massive paycheck as well. I think actually in an earlier episode that we titled The Checkpoints of FI, we talked about how a pretty cool checkpoint would be if you can get that tax bill within $200 of the perfect amount, then that feels like that's a massive checkpoint, because that tells you that you're optimizing your life based around your expected tax burden. I will tell you that from my end, it was a little bit more complicated for me this year, just because I had some changes in income and then I had a son. And so all of those different things that came into play really made that math a little bit more difficult. But I think the exercise is valuable.
Jonathan, what did you use to calculate your tax liability, or roughly estimate your liability?
So I always start with, first of all, what did you pay last year? That's a good place to start. And then what I like to do is I use TaxCaster, which is affiliated with TurboTax. It's a free tool. You can just type in TaxCaster on Google and put in some of your basic information, and it'll give you a very good estimate of where you're going to land from a federal tax level. And then I also kind of do the same thing with the state. So for Virginia, just do a Virginia tax calculator. There's also one, I think it's called Smart Asset, and it's at smartasset.com. And you can just type in that in the name of your state, and it'll take you to a calculator that will allow you to specifically filter not just for your federal taxes, but also for your local state as well. And it'll aggregate all that information together. I always start with the TurboTax TaxCaster first, just because I think that it is just so intuitive, user-friendly. It's got a great interface. But once I have that, I usually will dial down even further using this website as well. And those two together give me a very clear picture of where I'm going to land at the end of the year.
That's cool. That's very smart. And yeah, for people who are self-employed, this definitely becomes much more important, because your income may or may not fluctuate, but because your income likely fluctuates from prior years. So I definitely like to pay in based on like the safe harbor rules. So you avoid underpayment penalties when you need to pay in throughout the year, withholding. Most people withhold on their normal paychecks, but when you're self-employed, you actually have to make quarterly estimated payments. So there are these safe harbor provisions that allow you to basically not get clobbered with a penalty for underpayment. So essentially, you don't get a penalty if you have paid in 90% of the tax you owe for the current year, or 100% of the tax you owed for the prior year. So as long as you paid the smaller of those two, then you're safe under this safe harbor provision. So basically, we just look at our prior year tax and make sure we're paid in 100% of that. Now, assuming, of course, that if we knew our income was dramatically lower for the current calendar year, then of course you can use it based off of 90% of the tax you owe for the current year. But you just really want to avoid those underpayment penalties. So then come April 15th, when your return is due, you owe some money, but at least you're not going to owe the penalty. I think that's what Laura and I always try to avoid. So we're very cognizant of that safe harbor, and we will link up something in the show notes about how to avoid that underpayment tax penalty. So the federal tax, the last quarterly payment is due January 15th, actually, of the following year. So in this case, it's 1/1/18. So yeah, Laura and I are going through and trying to figure out what we have to pay now. So that's something that's certainly front of mind for us right now.
I love that, Brad. And one of the things I'm just thinking from the optimizer's perspective, like what is it that they might be looking at? And one of the things that comes to my mind specifically is how when you can reduce your taxable income by funding some of your pre-tax vehicles, in many cases, it actually makes you eligible for different types of savers credits and different types of deductions. So it seems to me like there's a real value to being if you're close to the line on something, to maybe putting a little bit extra, even if it almost hurts a little bit, into your pre-tax accounts.
Yeah, I mean, certainly looking at your retirement contributions would be part of a year-end checklist. So I think that's an important thing. For many of us, we're trying to max out our pre-tax buckets. So if you haven't hit your employee contribution level, currently it's $18,000 in 2017, and that's something that you intended to do. Well, I mean, you probably only have one or two paychecks left in 2017. So you want to get on that ASAP, change your contribution level, and just make it happen. Now, in all likelihood, if you intended to max out, you're probably done by now. But see if you can contribute to an IRA or a Roth IRA if that's your option. And yeah, just to be clear, with IRAs, your contribution deadline is not 12/31 of the current calendar year. You actually have until the tax return due date. So generally April 15th, unless it falls on a weekend. So, of the following year. So in this case, it would be April 15th of 2018. I'm not sure if that falls on a weekend or not, but so that's something definitely to consider.
Wait, and that actually, can I interrupt you for a second?
Of course.
Because to me, that actually speaks to the order of operations. So it seems to me like based on that, you should always be filling up your 401k first, since that is a calendar year, right? And you run out of time because you can always go back and do the IRA into the following year up till April.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jonathan. I never considered that, but yeah, that's a good call.
Thank you. All right, you may proceed.
I mean, as far as personal checklists go, we don't really do all that much. I mean, we look at our financial statements. So I actually, while I use Personal Capital, I really rely on my own Excel sheet. I just make sure basically at the end of the year that everything's updated. And I just like to keep track of my yearly income, expenses, basically my net worth by accounts. So on every quarter, I actually do this quarterly, so I'm not like recreating the wheel in December certainly and spending dozens of hours, but I keep this file updated pretty much all throughout the year. But at 12/31, I just lock it down and then roll it over to the next year. So I love to keep that historical at a glance look of where my income and expenses were for a given year and really where our net worth was on a quarterly basis. So it's definitely been an interesting, just take a look back at where we've been. And it really, for people who are looking for ways along the FI journey to get some kind of pats on the back or feel good moments, it is really nice to look back and say, holy cow, like 8 years ago, our net worth was only that. And now it's, multiple times that. It really is one of those great moments. And Laura and I do that. Yeah. At the end of every year, we kind of just take a look and see what happened this year. And, that's just a real simple thing. Obviously, it's not part of like a definitive checklist, but it adds value to our lives, certainly. And I guess also like this is kind of outside of the FI scope, but just think about at the end of the year, like, are there any due dates? Are there any things coming up for your professional? Like I know for an accountant, we need CPE. So continuing education. I, of course, in my Todoist app, I have on basically December 1st, it's time to do CPE. So of course, I'm reminded because I've set up that system in Todoist, which I absolutely love. But you do have these yearly recurring things that sometimes you just need to get done. I don't know, Jonathan, do you have
I do,
any kind of...
and I'm running out of time. I got to get them all done. I think I still have like 8 credits that I have to lock down before the end of the year. And I keep thinking, now this is going to be a week. I'm going to do it. And then I decide to come up with these ultimate guides to Chipotle post, and something important like that kicks it down the road. I need to lock it down.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. All right, guys, real quick. We had an idea. So first of all, there's some really valuable threads in the Facebook group, and unfortunately Facebook just buries them, but they are so valuable. So this question we posed to our group, there were, 30, 40 different checklist ideas that our group came up with and posted on this thread. We're going to include this link so you can see this specific thread on the show notes for today's episode. In order to access that, just go to today's episode, which will be choosefi.com/053R. It'll be a link down at the bottom. Now, you do need to be a part of the private Facebook group in order to see the thread, but just join us there. It's free to join, obviously, and we would love to share that information with you. All right, what I want to do is I just want to read a couple different ideas that our group came up with because I thought they were just excellent. Steve said, set up a folder, box, or whatever you use for 2018 tax documents. My stuff always gets mashed together, and I have to spend time pulling them apart when I get around to doing my taxes. I love that. Physician on Fire, he's a big proponent of looking into a donor advised fund, especially for you high income earners that may have capital gains bill coming or capital gains tax coming up in the near future. It's a great way to bypass that. So he has an article listed in that thread that you can check out. Another great one to look at is just any sort of life change type circumstances. Did you have a child this year? That is going to change your tax liability. Might be good to know how that affects that. So make sure that you just keep all of that stuff in mind. If you have HSAs, take a look at your HSA fund and how much you funded. Do you have any room to fill up that bucket? All of these. And in my mind, one other thing, we're going to do an episode on the HSA next year, and we'll try to give it some more time than we will today. But just keep in mind that if you have an HSA, The whole point, the whole reason that's valuable is that you get to put money in pre-tax, it grows tax-free, and you can pull it out tax-free as long as it's being used for a medical bill, which tells you, especially if you're not pulling it out right now because you want it to grow, that you need to be tracking the medical expenses that you're paying cash for. And that is giving you the excuse to draw this money out down the road tax-free, but it's your responsibility to document that, so you need to come up with a system. And so, the devil is in the details. Make sure you're thinking about that. Any other thoughts, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, that covered the vast majority of them. I mean, yeah, this thread certainly has dozens of comments, so people should check it out. But yeah, donations to charity are another thing. Just get organized. I think that's always my biggest thing is do the work. Don't scramble at the last minute. I think that's where people get into trouble, which is, oh, goodness, I don't know where any of my tax documents are. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know how much money I've put into my 401k this year, or et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's not how people in the FI community should live. Like, we should you do the simple work up front just by keeping organized, keeping track of things, staying on top, realizing when there are deadlines, and just being proactive. Like, I know that sounds like kind of on high advice, but it makes a huge difference. It really, really does. And that then enables you to be able to calculate your taxes and see, oh, am I falling in this bracket? Or what if I just gave a little bit more to charity or something, or I maxed out my accounts this year, it would get me down under X. I'm just speaking hypothetically, obviously, because I don't know people's situations, but like, you might qualify for credit that you otherwise wouldn't have. And then it could amplify the benefit of that, just that last little deduction. But you would not know that unless you did the work and just created that simple projection using those free tools that Jonathan mentioned. So I think that's really a great idea. Frankly, like, just get yourself organized and use one of those tools and just see what comes of it. And, it might this year just be ho-hum, but next year you might be on a line somewhere where it will make a difference. So I think that is definitely my high level thought of just be organized, have everything together, and just do your work ahead of time.
And Chris gave us a little tip with the Roth IRA and looking at the Affordable Care Act and how to optimize that just at the margins. So while the ACA is in play right now, I think maybe this will be some useful advice as well.
Hi, Brad and Jonathan. This is Chris Brooks. Brad, you might remember me from the earlier days of Travel Miles 101. You and I had some exchanges about board games because I'm a board game collector and nut. In fact, even one of my old side hustles was publishing board games. And if you've ever played the game Ink and Gold, that was one of the games that my company did back in the 2000s. Anyway, I was listening to your podcast with Tanya, and great input there from her about some kind of hacks you can do around dialing up and down your income. And I don't know if you've covered this one specifically, but I thought I would share it just in case. We've been FI for about 3 years now. And in the first year, as we were building up some of our kind of post FI businesses, we had very low income and we were just drawing off of some of our taxable investment. And we also joined the Affordable Care Act exchange here in Oregon. It was through the federal exchange. And one little trick that you can employ when your income is drawn down and you're on the exchange, and this was alluded to with Tanya, but I just wanted to be a little more explicit. You basically have this dial that you can turn on your income, and that is your Roth IRA conversions. And what we've done, we did this in 2015, and we plan to do it again this year because we've intentionally kind of drawn down our income again this year, is you can figure out where that tipping point is for your subsidy. And that's usually going to be in that $40,000 to $45,000 income range. And you can basically fill up that gap from your actual income to where that tipping point is, where the subsidy starts to decline, and just fill that gap up with Roth IRA conversions. So you basically have this dial to turn your income up to a point where you can still maximize the subsidy and then start kind of leaking over those traditional IRAs into your Roth IRA with really no downside. So for some of your folks that are post-FI and looking for some kind of spreadsheet maximization opportunities, this might be one to consider. Thanks, and keep up the great work.
I want to comment on this real quickly, Brad, just because this is how you look at it once you're no longer just struggling to keep your head above water. Now you're looking at things from this slightly more optimized path, and you're saying, what are all the things that you don't know? And something like this just sparks the light bulb. Oh, I hadn't considered that before. Maybe I should go find out a little bit more about how that might work and what sort of money that would save my family. You compound these tiny little hacks over time, and it just changes the game. See what I did there? Instead of saying game changer, I said changes the game. Totally different phrase. I remixed the remix. It was back to normal.
I am literally speechless.
Thank you so much, Chris, for calling in. I love that. And I love the board games. You're like a celebrity in my mind. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool to hear from Chris. I certainly remember emailing him years ago, and yeah, it's amazing how this stuff, like we talked about before, you have your tribe of people, and we all have these common threads and these common likes, and someone who's interested in board games, someone who's interested in travel rewards, and now FI. I mean, it's all goes hand in hand. So, Chris, thanks again for sending that voicemail in.
All right, and I thought maybe we could also spend a few minutes and talk about a voicemail that I got from Lindsay sharing her passive income stream side hustle.
Hey guys, my name is Lindsay Marsh, and I've been into the FI game for a few years now. It wasn't until about 3 months ago that I started to seriously think about generating second income stream. But not just a second income stream, something that could be self-sustaining and bring residual income in the future. I've been a full-time freelance graphic designer for over 12 years now. I only make money per project or hourly. The only way I make money in my main job is to have my butt in the seat working. I thought to myself, what if I taught classes and monetized those classes online and made money while I slept? Well, that's everybody's dream, isn't it? I started off on a teaching platform called Skillshare. It's kind of like the Netflix for classes online. People pay a monthly membership and they can basically binge watch any kind of classes that teach them anything from how to do watercolor to graphic design. And this platform was really successful in the creative type classes. So I created my first class. It was an Adobe Illustrator class. I had no traction for 1 week and I gave up. And I noticed I had someone watch 100% of my class a few days after I gave up. I go, oh, there's something there. Someone actually watched my class. I think I made about $4 that month. And since it was already the end of the month when I published the class, I thought that $4 seemed like hundreds of dollars. I was so excited about such a little bit of cash. I started to promote all my classes a little bit through design Facebook groups, Reddit, anywhere I thought it would be able to convert into people watching. I have a YouTube channel with design videos that's almost 10 years old, and I have about 2,000 subscribers. So I switched that channel over to cross-promote my classes. I started to gain a little bit of traction. By the end of my first month, I had $78. Woohoo! It takes about 6 hours to make a class, so I thought if I can make $30 an hour back on those classes, I'd call it worthwhile. So I started to create a few more classes. Once again, about 5 to 6 hours to create and upload each class. By the end of my second month, I reached almost $900 in payments. Wow, this is real income here. That month, I put my same classes on Udemy, which is a much larger class platform, and got about $100 in sales during the same month, using the same classes I put on Skillshare. So 0 additional hours of work. They call this content stretching, using the same content on multiple platforms to generate double income streams. So for the month of August, I made a little over $1,000. We're not even halfway through this next month, and I'm looking at my sales and stats, and if they keep up at the current pace, I will surpass that number by a good margin. I'm looking at over $1,400 this month. So $2,000 in the last couple months added to my net worth, and it's going straight into my investment accounts where it's going to generate some serious future cash. Anyways, I thought I would share what I've been up to help boost my net worth and FI earlier than expected by going out on a limb and trying something a little scary and new.
Lindsay, that is amazing. And you're right, going out on a limb, trying something new, but also what we talked about before, it's you need that tribe, right? Like that one person. There was that one person who watched. And maybe if it wasn't for that one person, you might have given up. But that one person and $4 that first time, that was enough to light that spark to make you realize, oh, wow, this is real. And to everyone out there, like the first time you make a little bit of money, even $4, or for me, it was like 30 cents on a Google AdSense click. Like it changes your life when you create a website and you actually realize, holy cow, I can earn some or maybe a lot of money from this. Lindsay, to her great credit, stuck with this and now is really rock and rolling, and she's figuring this out. That is just incredible. So a huge congratulations.
Yeah, I love that. That's inspiring. And Lindsay is in our Facebook group. I'm sure she would love it if you have questions. I know she posts this on the Tuesday side hustle thread that we have every single week. And this is a great place for if you have an idea or you're looking for an idea, you can find people that are in a similar space. You can ask them questions, or you can find out specifically what they're doing and maybe learn from them on their platform. Like Lindsay, she's teaching the skill set that she's developed on Udemy. That you don't need to recreate the wheel. What you need to do is look for a problem that you have solved and figure out, how can I share this idea with others? And I think that's what perfect implementation actually looks like. So congratulations, Lindsay, on having so much success so early on. So we got this question from J&A. And Jay says, my wife and I are 31 and are currently working in corporate America in the finance accounting field. We have about $1.4 million in invested real estate. Our net worth is very close to $1 million. It'll probably be there in the first quarter of 2018. We only have about $82,000 combined on retirement accounts between the IRA and the 401k. Listening to you guys has made us think whether or not we're maximizing in every way possible. We're not currently maxing out our retirement vehicles at work since we've been so focused on paying off our debt from real estate, and we've paid off about $100,000 this year alone. What do you suggest that we do? So Brad and I, what we love to do is this show is all about bringing in our community, and we have so many experts in their respective fields, and obviously the overlap is FI, but the expertise is different. And so Coach Carson has knowledge that it would take Brad and myself 10 to 15 or maybe a lifetime of knowledge to accumulate. And he's so generous with that information that we reached out to him and said, Coach, would you be willing to record a segment and answer this question on the show? He said yes. Super excited to play this voicemail for you today.
Hi, this is Chad Carson. I want to thank J and A for the great question. I think the core of the question kind of comes down to, seems like, how do you distribute a limited amount of savings towards two really good vehicles, real estate investing and retirement accounts? And so you're moving towards FIRE, you're trying to accumulate wealth, and you kind of have that dilemma of you don't know how to allocate it, where to allocate it, how much to allocate it between the two. I think it's a good question because, in an ideal world, obviously, I think we'd all do both. If you were a real estate investor and you had a retirement account, you would want to take advantage of both of them because they both had their pluses and minuses. I happen to be I've used real estate investing heavily in my own path. I happen to like it because real estate investing, I think if you're moving towards FIRE, you have a lot more control over the process of the wealth building and the process of going from a small amount of wealth to a bigger amount of wealth. The kind of the levers that you're using are not as dependent on outside forces. So for example, you buy a rental property, it produces income, you save up that income and you reinvest it somehow, kind of like dividend investing. You also have what you're doing, which is you save up some of that income and you save up savings from savings from somewhere else, and you use that to start paying down mortgages, accelerating mortgage pay downs over time. Both of those are very predictable. They're not dependent on appreciation or growth or the market, those kind of things. And so I really like that if you're shooting for a certain date for FIRE, you can have that predictable path and say, I save a certain amount every year, I pay it down, and then I reach my goal. I also like with real estate investing that once you get there, it produces a much stronger income for every dollar that you have invested. So if you have $100,000 invested in real estate, maybe that produces a free and clear house, produces $6,000 to $8,000 in net rent, perhaps. Whereas $100,000 in the stock market or dividend investing, you're going to have maybe a 2% dividend, and you'll have to sell some of your shares over time in order to get more income. I like that about real estate. But then on the other hand, of course, retirement accounts have their advantages. They're a great tax shelter going in. They grow tax-free. And depending on the account, Roth versus 401k or traditional IRA, you might be able to take it out tax-free as well. So you don't want to miss that opportunity, particularly if there's a match from your employer. So they're both great. But I think the core of your question comes down to more about your goals and what your timeline is and how close you are to reaching financial independence. Because they're both great vehicles and they both work for different people and different reasons. But what I've kind of heard from your question is, for example, if you're a year or two off from FIRE and all you need to do is pay down, you have another year like you just had where you pay down another $100,000. And if that got you to your FIRE goal, or even to like a more kind of a sub milestone. So if it got you to your FIRE goal and replaced all of your income from your job, or if it took you to where it replaced 50% of your income, and it was able to change your life because one of you were able to leave your job or both of you were able to leave, I think that's worth pursuing because it's been pretty successful for you. And if you're that close, my kind of gut feeling is just finish the race. And yes, you're missing out on some opportunities on your retirement accounts, but you're 31 years old and there's going to be a lot of time to build up wealth and to build up those retirement accounts. But there's not many opportunities that if you could push and finish it and reach FIRE and have all those flexibility opportunities and time and to reflect and think and do something different, I think that's worth missing out on some of the other stuff. So that would be my kind of short answer. But the other part is if you do reach that milestone, getting back to that balance point, at some point, if you're going to continue earning income, if you can still kind of reach that match, maybe have this kind of reach that minimum level that your employer would match, and then anything above that go towards real estate investing, that would be kind of more of an optimal place to be. And that's something I've tried to do in my own world. But in summary, you guys have done awesome. Congratulations. I'd love to hear what your ultimate decision is, but go back and think about your own goals. That's my suggestion. Think about your timeline. And depending on that, either push ahead and finish the race, or if you kind of reach a milestone, at that point, adjust your strategy from there. So thank you for asking the question, and thanks for having me on to answer it. Best of luck to you, and look forward to hearing how things go.
All right, Brad, you know how I always try to surprise you, or what you say, sandbag you with something new each week? I'm going to go ahead and try and sandbag Coach Carson here. Super excited. We're going to try and get him on the show a couple times throughout the beginning of next year. And I know you and I last week talked about trying to get our own, I talked about, and you and I grabbed you and said,
humor you.
Humor me. And I said, I'm going to try to get a fourplex by the end of next year. And this is me dipping my toes into the real estate world, starting totally from scratch. What I love about our community is there's so much that you can learn for free on the internet, and to our audience like that. I'm all about that. Go see what you can learn for free. And I would say that Bigger Pockets has a podcast that is a wonderful resource for you if you want to kind of listen to people share their stories of what they've actually done. I would say that Coach Carson is probably one of the most generous people that I have met with just giving away free information, and you can learn so much directly from his content. And I will say that Coach Carson also just recently came out with a course. We were talking about courses earlier. Coach Carson is a perfect example of what it looks like when someone has built absolute trust with a community and he has added so much value back. And so he has just started unrolling a paid course. And basically what you're doing is you're getting access to Coach Carson as close to one-on-one as would be feasible. And he's using like a private dynamic, like a Facebook group for his core audience to basically walk them and help them go from scratch to what it would look like at the finish line. I've just set up and I'm doing the class with him. And so I hope to basically incorporate some of the skills he's talking about, combine that with maybe bringing him on the show and have him walk me through this process and share it with you guys. But I'm super excited for where his course is going to go in the future. And I think for people that are looking for concentrated, dense information, I just trust him. And I think that he is a reliable source of someone that's putting good content out there, is doing it from the right place and frame of mind, and just very excited to see kind of where this goes and what the possibility is for our community as they decide to maybe branch out and explore maybe the real estate asset class as well. So just generally very excited about this. And Coach Carson, thank you so much for sharing your insight on this question. All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. As usual, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. We have two books that we do. We do Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future, and we do J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. If you want to win a copy of one of these books, all you need to do to enter the drawing, go to choosefi.com/iTunes. Follow the instructions there and leave us a short written review. And then just send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under so we can match it up. And we would love to enter you in that drawing. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have one winner today, and the winner is Roger.
And Roger says, and Roger actually left us on Stitcher, which was pretty cool. Roger says, a life-altering podcast. Ever since my wife introduced me to this podcast, I've been binge listening to Choose FI. I finally got caught up this week, and the information has been staggering. Episode 3, Let's Talk About Fees, is where I was hooked, as I was horrified to learn what my investment choices at the time were going to cost me. Even when the topic at hand doesn't apply to me and likely never will, Jonathan and Brad managed to keep the content relatable. Great job, guys. Wow. Thank you so much, man. That was one of the early days episodes, Brad. And actually, I remember that episode was inspired by content that you had written a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, on Richmond Savers way back in the day about, I think it was something to the effect of Vanguard and the impact of fees on your net worth. And yeah, that was, way back in the podcast days. I think that was one of our 20-minute episodes back when we used to do those. But fees matter. That's the end of the day. I think that's what we've hit on with investing, at least you and I personally. Fees matter.
Well, and like someone's listening to this right now and maybe they haven't heard episode 3, or maybe they're just new to the podcast and they're wondering, well, why does it matter? Let's just do an extreme example real quick. Let's say you have $2 million, kind of towards the end of this timeline. You're about to pull the trigger. You're about to say, I have hit financial independence. I'm exiting the workforce. I'm going to be drawing down on all this money that I've saved. But you just kind of lazily left this in an actively managed fund that was charging you maybe a more egregious number just for the sake of this example. Let's say they were charging you a 2% fee for assets under management. That fee, that's costing you $40,000 a year in advisor fees. I mean, that is crushing you. And if you're living off 4% of your assets, year over year, essentially you're paying half of your annual living expenses in advisor fees. So if you're like, whoa, wait, I should probably go and look at this, then go back and listen to episode 3 for a more in detail look at what that's actually costing you. And I agree with you, Roger, the fees matter. So all right, guys. Hey, can you do us one favor? If you got value from this episode today, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, just take 1 second and press the subscribe button on the platform that you're listening to this on. We're obviously on iTunes. We're on Overcast, Player FM, CastBox, your player of choice. Just press the subscribe button. It lets the platforms know that you're getting value from this show and that you want to be here when we produce additional content. Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of this community. The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.